It's with a shared feeling, mixture of joy and sadness, that I'm taking the floor at the moment. In fact, the moment now is very serious. At this specific moment where we're gathered together, there are unjust wars which are carried out, and they lead to disastrous consequences. We can count up millions of people who've been displaced, women and children who've been raped in mass, family tissues that will never be able to be built again. So faced with this macabre tableau, we can't stay insensitive. We have got the moral obligation to give the same attention to these evils that are eating at the future of our nations and which are manifesting themselves on the surface of the globe. Dr. Martin Luther King one day said, and I'm quoting, "An injustice, wherever it be, is a threat for justice everywhere. We're all inevitably in a relationship, a network of mutual relationships linked by a common destiny. Everything that affects one person is going to affect all of us indirectly." End of quote. Currently, there's an unjust war which is carried out against my country, the Democratic Republic of Congo, by terrorist groups supported by Rwanda, and that, of course, involves all of us. In the eastern part, it's a repetitive prey of conflicts, and rape was massively used and carries on being used as a war arm. It goes without saying that the absence of conflicts, if there hadn't been conflicts, we wouldn't have to deplore all kinds of serious crimes with regard to sexual violence. And therefore, it's absolutely essential to work on the prevention of these conflicts and to promote what unites rather than what divides us, and that with mutual respect and with a swell of love and fraternity. I salute the framework with regard to the prevention of sexual violence elaborated or drawn up by various stakeholders under the leadership of Madam Pramila Patten, but also her work is really admirable. Ladies and gentlemen, just as a reminder, the framework with regard to the prevention of sexual violence linked to conflict is an essential document, and our states have got to appropriate it so as to reinforce public structural policies and operational policies so as to prevent sexual violence linked to conflicts. And here I express the need to accompany the United Nations with regard to the implementation of this framework within the DRC. At the same time, the DRC carries on doing its best in order to reinforce its device for prevention of sexual violence during times of conflicts in accordance with the addendum to the joint communiqué on sexual violence linked to conflicts signed on the 3rd of December 2019. And in fact, the launch of this campaign, immediate zero tolerance against crimes of violence, sexual violence, is based on the President of the Republic, Félix Antoine Tshisekedi Tshilombo, and the signature of commitment by the superior officers of the security and defense forces to fight against reprehensible acts within their respective teams, and also the establishment of a fund for reparation, and that's also praiseworthy initiative with regard to the government of my country. Sometimes it's deplorable to note that these multiple efforts are really not properly recognized for their value. Ladies and gentlemen, my country, the DRC, has recorded millions of deaths and still crying once again for its daughters and its sons today because of a barbaric practice at another time, that of aggression. And the deep causes are linked to the need to grab our natural riches and therefore the regional ramifications are also associated with multinational companies. So we cannot contribute efficiently to the prevention of sexual violence and conflict if we're not able to stop multiple conflicts whose justification has no value faced with the tragedy that they give rise to. Albert Einstein said, "For sure, the world is a dangerous place to live in, and because of those, not because of those who carry out evil, but those who are watching and allow it to happen." So let's not look at the negative parts of history. Let's have a firm resolution to act and also to put an end to these interminable cycles of violence. As we're all well aware, impunity and the lack of adequate reparations feed violence and perpetuate this cycle. Reparation appears as being an essential element so as to guarantee the non-repetition and ricochet of the prevention of future avoidable conflicts. If we consider the fact that sexual violence linked to conflict represents a serious violation of international humanitarian law, and that the state can be held responsible for acts committed by its representatives or for having not respected its obligation to protect the population during a period of conflict, the government of my country has decided that it was essential to establish, without the judicial framework, a program of administrative reparations within the framework of transitional justice. The state therefore decided to define the methods of reparation at an individual and collective level, and also introducing guarantees of non-recurrence of these serious violations of human rights and sexual violence committed during periods of conflict. It represents considerable progress. At the time that we're talking, there's a draft law on the protection and reparation for victims, and it's being examined within Parliament. And that's a first for Africa. And there are going to be a number of innovations, and apart from the establishment of a national fund, which is going to be responsible for reparation, we're also talking about, first of all, the right to access to justice, truth, and reparation by eliminating certain barriers with regard to the legal costs, and also by making sure that judicial assistance is going to be free and responsibility of the state. Secondly, there are going to be guarantees so as not to repeat. There's going to be vetting. We're going to have reforms within sectors of justice, security, and also politics, but also and above all by making sure that the principle of exclusion to access of the public responsibility against the authors of the said crimes. As far as I'm concerned, when I see all these conflicts that persist throughout the world, today in my country, in the DRC, and it's unjustified, my commitment as a global champion of prevention of sexual violence linked to conflict is renewed. And that's why I would like to say, dear Pramila, dear survivors, you can always count on me. In order to finish my speech today, I will once again borrow this phrase from the Dr. Albert Einstein, who says, "The world that we've created is the result of our thoughts. It cannot change without our changing the way in which we think." End of quote. We must change the way in which we look at others, whether we're Congolese or Ukrainian. And this way of stealing the goods of others through force doesn't give rise to anything good. We must abandon this odious practice, and then the world will be better. Thank you very much.